We've been told that evolution is a fact, and that it is the only valid interpretation when we look at the history of how things began. Yet, do the claims of evolution truly stand up to the evidence? If we look at it from a scientific point of view, do we say with certainty that evolution has happened? When I was studying the sciences in school, one of the things that really stood out to me was that things had to have been designed. There were design systems everywhere I looked, tremendous complexity, amazing diversity everywhere I looked. The reality was, however, my textbook said this all happened by accident, by luck, and by chance. And as I've studied these things, one of the things that has come clear to me is what I call the ultimate academic mystery. And that is the whole idea is how is it possible you can have two scientists who have studied in their own respective field, they're experts, they look at the same information and yet they come up with two entirely different conclusions. The one on the left says, "Isn't evolution wonderful?" The other scientist looking at the same bit of information says, "What an awesome, powerful creator." Now these two scientists, do they live on the same planet or a different planet? Same planet, right? Are they looking at the same information or different information? Same information, right? See, these two guys could have gone to the same university, could have read the same textbooks, could even have listened underneath the same instructors. So what's happening here? Well, the struggle here is not with the information. The struggle here is with the interpretation. It's all about how they're interpreting it. See, the man with the evolutionary glasses who are looking at the world around him just with a naturalistic, mechanistic point of view doesn't even consider God as being an option in his creation. And yet the other scientist gives God the credit and says, yes, he has to have been the author because of what we're seeing. It couldn't have happened just by accident or chance. What we're going to be looking at this session is some of the so-called best proofs of evolution. And we're going to be looking at some broad categories and then also looking at some specific examples under each one. The first one we're going to look at is a so-called proof of change. You know, when you look at populations, you'll see individuals there that have different characteristics, different features, and we're told that this change is because of evolution, right? Well, does it have to be evolution? Can there be another explanation for the same situation? The second so-called proof of evolution is this notion that because something is similar in the present, that proves a common ancestor. The third one we're going to be looking at is the whole idea of sequence. Now, we've all seen this in the textbooks. You see a certain object or animal or structure, and it's put in a left or right sequence where the most primitive is over on the left-hand side and the most advanced on the far right. And then there's these intermediates that are put in between. And because we see this sequence here, this is a proof of evolution. Or is it? And lastly, we're going to be looking at the whole idea that we're told that in our bodies, as well as in the bodies of animals, there's certain structures that just don't function. They're junk. They're just a bunch of useless parts. They're called vestigial organs. Are these things really junk? Do we know a function for them? Are they really proof of evolution? Well, these are going to be some broad categories that we're going to be looking at in just a short period of time. Well, let's begin with the whole idea of change. When we look at populations, we all agree there is a lot of change, isn't there? I mean, if you look at the world around you today, you're sitting at the airport, you see people walking along, you recognize people look very different, right? It's estimated there's about 10 million normal variations in the DNA of man, all right? Now, is that evolution? I don't think so. Let's look at Darwin's finches. This is one of them that we see a lot in the textbooks. Darwin's finches are considered an example of evolution before our very eyes. Darwin observed when he went to the Galapagos Islands that there was a variety of different finches, and they had changes to their beak structure. Some had thick, strong beaks, some had thin, narrow beaks. And he made a couple of different assumptions. Number one, that these different type of finches all came from an original pair. So we started with finches, and we ended up with these different type of finches. His other set of assumption was depending on the type of beak structure that they had. If they had the thick, strong beaks, they would have an advantage in certain environments versus the one with the thin, narrow beaks. For example, if we're in a drought situation in the environment, the seeds would be very, very thick-shelled. As a result, those with the thick, strong beaks would be able to crush those little seeds and be able to eat. So they would have the benefit there. Versus the one with the long, narrow ones, they would be able to catch insects maybe a little bit better. But here's the question I have. What did we start off with? Finches, right? What did we end up with? Finches. All we're really seeing here is some variation within a kind. You know, as a veterinarian, I see much more variation within the dog kind. Think of the hundreds of different breeds of dogs that are out there today. You know, you have anything from a Chihuahua, and some people really debate whether or not that's really a dog, to poodles, to schnauzers, to shelties, to golden retrievers, to Great Danes. Now, we don't call that evolution, do we? No, we simply have a dog kind, and we basically begin to select out certain traits as breeders do, right? That information was already there. Now, these are small changes in respect of the features that we're seeing. Our textbooks call that microevolution. Micro meaning small, evolution meaning change. But the question we really need to ask ourselves, is this truly evolution? All I'm seeing here is genetic diversity that God programmed into the DNA from the very beginning. Now contrast this change with another type that we see in our textbooks. This is called macroevolution. Macro meaning big, evolution meaning change. This is the idea that one kind of creature changes into something totally different. Fish changing into amphibians, amphibians into reptiles, reptiles into mammals, and then finally man emerges. Now you should see evidence of these missing links in that transition from one to the next, shouldn't you? And yet we don't see that. We should have millions of these transitional forms everywhere we look. But also we should see it in the living record too, shouldn't we? You know, think of it. We have millions of different species of animals that are running around today. Wouldn't you expect that some of them are transitioning from one kind into something totally different? Do we see that at all? No. All we really see is what looks like the finished end products, right? Everything looks fully formed, fully functional. So all of a sudden we see that there's a big problem with this whole idea of change as an argument for evolution. We do see that there's minor modification within populations of creatures, but it's limited. It can only go so far. What we see is that there's some invisible genetic boundary that God established that we're not able to cross over. And we see variation within a kind, within the dog kind, the horse kind, the frog kind, whatever kind you're looking at. So genetic diversity, yes. Evolution, no. What about antibiotic resistance? Here's another so-called example of change. You start off with this population of bacteria. It's then challenged by some type of a drug. The majority of the bacteria die out, and there's a few remaining that have resistance. Now, is that evolution? Well, what do we start off with? Bacteria. What do we end up with? Bacteria. All we're seeing is genetic variation in the process here. What about the peppered moths? Now, this is another one that's one of those icons of evolution. We hear so much about this. You know, you started off back before the Industrial Revolution with two different types of moths. Basically, they had the same name, Biston betullaria, but there were two varieties. One was a light color, one was a dark color. The ones that were the light color had an advantage because they could blend right into the lichen that was growing on the tree bark, and that was light in color. So if a bird was looking and it was hungry, who would he go after? The one he could see, right? He'd go after the dark variety. Now, at the time of the Industrial Revolution, something different happened to environment. The pollution added up, killed off the lichen. Now the natural dark color of the bark was shown, and so now the dark variety would have a benefit versus the light variety. And so if the birds saw it at this point, what would happen? They would go after the light ones, right? Now we're told this is evolution before our eyes. Was this evolution? What did we start off with? Moths, right? What did we end up with? Moths. And in both cases, we see that both varieties of moths were already there. It was pre-existing in the genetic information from the very, very beginning. Yes, we see change. We do not see evolution there. One of the primary mechanisms that we're told that drives evolution are mutations. All right, take a look at this slide here. Here we have a snake with two heads. Are two heads better than one? I mean, he may have a slight advantage from the standpoint that if a mouse runs by and in his first field of view he misses it, with his second field maybe he can leap and catch it, right? But you know, oftentimes with mutations what we find is there may be a slight benefit in a selected situation, but as a whole there's also a cost to it with these mutations. Think about him trying to get away from a predator. He's no longer streamlined, is he? If he's trying to get through that grass, he could easily hit a fork in the road and he would be stopped right in the midst. Take a look at this bull. How many legs does he have? He has 5, right? Now, are 5 legs better than 4? Not really. You know, this is a non-functional limb that he has here. He could get something underneath it. He could rub it and get it infected. He could have some problems based on this extra structure. Now, you know, for the farmer, this might be an advantage, because now at the meat market, he's going to weigh a little bit more. But the reality is it doesn't help this organism himself. One of the things we also find with genetic engineering, we can make hairless tomatoes, seedless fruit, hornless cattle, right? Now that benefits us, doesn't it? Does it benefit the things where we see the mutations? No. So what we see with mutations, they're not necessarily anything that benefits the organism itself. What about the bald rooster? Does this guy have any real advantage? First of all, he's probably not going to get any girlfriends, right? Second of all, he's going to be much more vulnerable to environmental extremes. From the standpoint, if it's during the summer and he's hot outside, he's not going to be able to insulate himself when it gets really hot. He can easily get a sunburn, right? On the other side of it, if he's in a very cool environment, he could die of hypothermia. And it turns out that's exactly what happened to this guy. His siblings, who didn't have the mutation, who had the feathers, they did just fine, but he wasn't able to withstand the cold. The important thing to recognize with mutations themselves is they're not good things generally, they're bad things. Think for just a moment if we had another bad situation, a disaster, such as Chernobyl, where you basically had a nuclear reactor that melted down. Do you think scientists would tell you to go out there and just bask in the radiation laying on your lawn chairs? No way, right? Because even though that causes mutations, mutations aren't good. Well, the reality is Dr. Gary Parker puts it with mutations are damaging, disfiguring, disabling, disease-causing, and deadly. Other than that, they're wonderful. Another requirement that you would expect from mutations, if they're going to drive evolution, would be that they would have to be able to add information to the DNA. If you think of what they tell us in evolution, everything started out with that first primordial cell. This would be the least complex of any creature that we know today, right? So it wouldn't have a very sophisticated blueprint. If it went and evolved finally to the most complex, which is us, you'd expect there to be a lot of information that would have to be added to it. Information about encoding for our eye, for our teeth, for our brain, for our heart, our lungs, our liver, all those kind of things would have to be encoded now for humans versus what you had with that very first cell, right? But what we find when we look at DNA and mutations is that when mutations take place, these are mistakes in the DNA itself. They lose information. They never gain information. We know of no mutations that actually cause an increase of information where there's going to be a new innovative structure, such as an organ, such as a wing, such as a leg, or anything like that. So the bottom line is we don't see mutations fulfilling a requirement that would cause things to become more complex and more diversified as time actually goes on. So when we look at change from an evolutionary point of view, we do see minor change. It's not evolution, it's simply genetic diversity. Let's look at the second so-called proof of evolution and recognize that all these so-called proofs of evolution are what I would subtitle things aren't always the way they appear. At first, these claims sound good, but as you have more information looking at it, we recognize there's some real problems here. The second claim is that when things are similar in the present, that means there's a common ancestor. We heard that over and over again in our textbooks. Let's look at some of the examples that we see today that our kids are getting. One of them is called ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. Another one that we look at is homology. Now you may have two questions with both of these terms. Number one, what in the world are they talking about? And number two, why don't these people speak in plain English? Well, let's look at these different ideas. They're very simple, but I think it shows you that just because something is similar doesn't mean any common ancestry or evolutionary relationship. An easy way to think of ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, I call it ORP, is to think of the basic scenario that we're told on how man evolves. Basically, you started off with that first primordial cell, and then it was transformed into a fish-like animal, and then an amphibian, a reptile, and then man came on the scene, right? We're told this takes billions of years for this transformation to take place by evolution. Now, the difference between this and ORP is ORP takes place every day in the womb of a woman who's pregnant. What we're told is that very first primordial cell is just like the fertilized egg that happens at the time of conception. We'll call him little Johnny. Little Johnny goes through a fish-like stage, an amphibian stage, a reptile stage, a mammal stage, and at some point before 9 months is up, he becomes human. How many of you have heard that thing before? See, they're saying by looking at the embryos, they look similar to these different creatures. Therefore, there's a common ancestry. Well, where in the world did this idea come from? Well, the person responsible, his name is Ernst Haeckel. He was a zoologist, a contemporary of Darwin back in the 1800s. He looked at embryonic development of animals, compared that to embryonic development in man, and because there was similarity, he said common ancestry. Along with this claim is also the idea that little Johnny has gill slits, a yolk sac, and a tail. Now the gill slits would imply that he goes to a fish-like stage, yolk sac, a reptile, tail like a monkey, all right? Well, what we know today is that all of these claims are inaccurate. None of these structures actually develop into those type of structures. We know that that simply just was something Ernst Haeckel thought about. The good news, at least about this idea, is that more and more scientists are beginning to come out and say, time out, this is all wrong. Here's a quote out of the New York Times. It says, several years ago, though, biologists discovered that many of the drawings were fraudulent and that the true resemblances were not nearly so striking. Nevertheless, some textbooks still contain them. One of the texts that includes the faulty drawings is a third edition of Molecular Biology of the Cell, the bedrock text of the field. In an interview, Dr. Elberts, who's the president of the National Academy of Sciences, said he believed Haeckel's drawings were overinterpreted or highly idealized rather than outright fakes. But he said they would be removed from the fourth edition of the textbook to appear at the end of the year. It goes on to say, biologists say the findings do not shake their confidence in the theory of evolution. The good news here, again, is that we know it's wrong. We want to get it out of the textbooks. What we've seen when we look at creatures all around us, as well as human beings, that from the time of fertilization all the way through the time of maturity, fish are always fish, turtles are always turtles, pigs are always pigs, cows are always cows, cats are always cats. You know, as a veterinarian, I saw numerous times where kittens were undeveloped, you know, in the process of just being in the profession. And never did I see any kittens that looked like catfish. Never did I see any that looked like catbirds. They were just underdeveloped kittens. And when we look at man from the time of fertilization, development, and maturation, he's 100% human from the very beginning. So we can put an X through that whole idea. Let's look at the other idea of similarity. It's called homology. Homology is the idea that if you look at certain structures, you'll see that they resemble one another in man as well as in animals. And the one that we often see in textbooks is if we look at our arm. Our arm has a basic design, a bony pattern. We have one bone in the upper arm, a couple of bones in our forearms, a series of bones in our wrists, and that radiates into our digits. If you compare that structure with that of a leg of a dog, a leg of a horse, wing of a bat or bird, it looks very similar, doesn't it? But there's some modifications there. Now, you know, we talked about the ultimate academic mystery. Two scientists look at the same information, yet come up with two entirely different conclusions. What happens when an evolutionary scientist looks at this? He says, well, the reason why there's shared characteristics, why there's similar structures, is because they have a common ancestor, all right? Now, what happens when a creation scientist looks at this? He says, well, the reason why there's similarities in basic design there is because of a common designer, not a common ancestor. Well, wait a second. How in the world can we determine which one of these are right? Because when we're looking at these structures, we're not seeing them forming before our eyes, do we? We see the finished end products right now. Well, if evolution's true, we should see some supporting evidence that this came from a common ancestor. And the two things we really should see is common genes will encode for common structures, and they should develop through a common way of embryology. Now, what am I talking about there? Think for just a moment if you're at home and you've got two neighbors. You have the Joneses who live over here, you have the Smiths who live over here. Both of them are comprised of a mom and dad and two kids. The likelihood is the two kids over here, for the Joneses, are going to look like each other and resemble their parents because of a common genetics, right? If you look at the Smiths over here, the same situation. The kids will look similar to each other, look similar to their parents. Common genes, common similarity. So we do see a logic based on this evolutionary interpretation that similar genes of the Jones and the Smith family will produce similar offspring for their kids, where the kids will resemble their parents. However, when we're looking at homologous structures, this whole idea, the arm of man, the leg of a horse and dog, the wing of a bird and bat, even though there are similarities superficially, we do not see that translates back to the same genes to make those structures or the same embryonic path for their development. Dr. Michael Denton wrote this in his book, Evolution, a Theory in Crisis. He's talking about homology, and the fields of science from the standpoint of genetics and embryology have said just the opposite of what the prediction has been, that this would be proof for evolution. He says it's become clear that this principle cannot be extended in the same way. Homologous structures are often specified by non-homologous genetic systems, and the concept of homology can seldom be extended back into embryology. So although they look similar on the outside, we see not a common set of genes or a common set of embryonic development to produce these same structures, which totally breaks down this whole argument of a common ancestor. See, similarities in the present do not prove past origin. What about the third major category that we're going to be talking about right here with supposed proofs of evolution? And that is line up any type of object, structure, or animal in this type of a sequence and then claim that this is proof of evolution. Now, you've all seen these kind of illustrations before for the evolution of man. So much of this artwork is based on imagination. We don't see any real evidence that these things existed because the fossil evidence is so fragmentary and that it supports multiple interpretations. But you know, it's very easy